Hello there, this is Dr. John Herbert, the Deputy Head of Lancing College, giving you a brief talk through on some of the skills related to revision and associated to that, how to relax and to function well under time conditions. I'll try and talk you through a few techniques. There's really three phases to revision and to preparing for examinations, and as the slide suggests, the first of those is actually getting the information into your mind in a format that's going to be helpful for you. The second then is practicing how to get that information out in the format that the examiners want. And the third really is staying calm and focused and able to produce information under time pressure. The intelligent student should, of course, also be asking themselves, what is the point of a practice examination or a set of trials examinations to begin with? The important thing to realise is that any trial examination or internal examination is simply an opportunity to experience the types of tests that we do and to get some feedback so that we can refine processes. It's about helping you to consolidate your knowledge and to review where you currently are, but most importantly, none of it is all defining. The only really important sets of examinations, which these are all preparation for, are the actual public examinations, the endpoint examinations. Everything else is just a case of continual refinement and practice. So I really would urge students not to overemphasize the importance of these. They're just one part of a more general educational process. Let's move on then to the first phase of our revision, which is getting that information into the student's mind. There's some preparation work which is important here to begin with, and that's to find out by getting some past papers what the trials examination looks like, what the division of time's like, and just acclimating yourself with that so that you can make sure that you have the right mindset, that you feel prepared. Because all of the research demonstrates that the more open you are to the experience of the exam, the less stressful it will be, the better you will do. So that research is pretty important. Let's get practical then. There are numerous ways in which any student can start to get that information into their mind. Let's review a few. The first way is a don't. This is the do not think that just reading passively through your notes is enough. It won't be. The first key tip is that revision should be active, that it should involve review of notes, but also making a product from them, doing something active with them. But before you even start, you need to have a look and make sure that you've got the right notes to begin with. So that note audit to make sure you have everything you need before you even start is vital. Some of you might recognize this bespectacled gentleman who has a rather better bank balance than mine. His advice here is clear, and what it means in this context is take a look around your class, see who is taking the really good notes, and if you're finding any gaps in your notes, ask to borrow them. The wonders of mobile telephones here and cameras, scanners, etc. on phones and computers is that you can very quickly reproduce copies of notes, and there's an awful lot of our work also by Microsoft Teams, for example, which is electronic and captured that way. So ask your teachers too, but make sure that you are making friends with and gaining knowledge from those people who will be able to provide you with anything you're missing before you even get going. The principle of layering notes is absolutely key. So once you have the review of all of your class notes and that's all complete, then start précising and summarizing. Start to make notes on the notes. And then if needs be, make notes on the notes and layer it on so that you're constantly going through that layered process of review, refinement, condensation. That will really help. One layer should trigger the next layer. And what I'd say is, when you've got it down to flashcards, for example, with a few words on them, then see if they then trigger that next layer so that you are layering on and piling on that annotation. That more active process will help the longer term memorization. As any teacher knows, variety and doing something a bit different tends to shock the brain a little bit, and that wakes you up. So think about some new ways of doing things. A few quick examples here. If you've got a mobile telephone or you've got a computer like this one, record yourself talking through those notes, and then let's say if you're out on a walk, then just play that stuff back. We all experience that slight horror of listening to ourselves being played back. That of itself makes you pay attention, even if you freeze up a little with anxiety, you hear yourself anew. That makes you pay attention. And you can very quickly talk through those notes and review them as you go along. That process of review and re-review we'll come back to in a moment. Other ideas include a learning walk to encode an argument. So for example, if you've got a process of getting up in the morning, brushing your teeth, going downstairs to make some notes, if you're trying to remember a linear process, so for example, the causes of the First World War, then you could have a post-it note on each of those different causes so that you're pinning those ideas quite literally to something, a routine that you already remember. That helps you to memorize that bit because you can relive the walk and remember the post-it notes that way. Another way of getting information in is if you happen to like drawing or visual ideas, you can scrapbook or storyboard a process or a sequence just so that the very act of a quick doodle helps you to remember it. Similarly, you can use mnemonics. So some of you, for example, mnemonics being a series of words that help you remember something. So some old hags carry a huge tub of ale. I still remember. Absolute gibberish as a mnemonic, but sine equals opposite over hypotenuse, etc. All I'm doing there is allowing myself to remember through a mnemonic there. And remembering processes that way is quite helpful. The underlying thing here is do something new, shock yourself, make yourself think about it in a new way. It tends to be really helpful. The fact is, of course, that you're not going to eventually, when it comes to answering your examination, you're very unlikely to be asked to storyboard something or to write a mnemonic or to sing or to dance. And some people do, for example, if you're into dance, then you can invent a little dance with the movements and pin the ideas to them that way, just the same as some people do it by moving about. And if you very quietly do that little dance to yourself come the exam, if that helps and triggers that memory, it's just about pinning the ideas to something that aids you. However, you're not going to write your final essay via the medium of dance. What we're focusing at the minute is just getting that information into the mind. Thereafter, how we get it out, we then need to practice separately. Let's talk here for a moment about how, when you've produced original notes, so you've gone from your original stuff and then you've made whatever your product might be, when you need to go back and look at it again to transfer it from the short-term memory into the long-term. Well, on the x-axis down on the horizontal of this graph, we can imagine time down there. And when we first learned something, I would suggest to you that you go back on whatever tangible product, be it some post-it notes, a set of flashcards, whatever it is, I would look at them again. So if you spent half an hour on something earlier in the day, I would review that at the end of the day again for 5 minutes. Because as you can see on this graph, what that means is that first review period means that it then takes longer for the detail to fade off. So I might look at it first again for 5 minutes, that set of flashcards or set of notes, whatever it may be, at the end of the first day, and then I'd come back to it a couple of days later and I would review it and re-review it, and then perhaps 3 days after that I might go back and re-review it. And that idea is all the time moving the fine detail from the short-term memory, that which can be recalled immediately, through into the long-term memory, something that stays there. And you have to layer that detail on. So revise, review, test, review again. Slow, regular, steady is the way. And this is precisely why we have multiple trials examinations, because that whole process of testing and revision is what gets that information to stick. The other thing to consider here is phasing, particularly if you've got lots of subjects that you're revising for. So I think the thing to think about to begin with, I would normally break up your subjects into 3 areas. So I'd think about those things that you're really strong at. And of course, what you're aiming to do there is to consolidate those strengths. You might need a little less time on them initially, but obviously your target there should be to make sure that you're doing really well. Then another third of them might be the subjects where you identify as the ones that you struggle a bit more with. There, I would be looking at pouring a bit more, say 10 to 20% more revision time on those subjects than for the standard ones. And then you'll have your middle third, which are the ones that you are broadly confident about. That will be the standard. So I would say perhaps initially the ones that you're really strong at, minus 10%. The ones that you struggle at, plus 10%. And then the standard, the ones in the middle there, about the norm. Now for me, obviously, the longer period of time in which you have to revise, the more you can divide that up. And as you do your revision, you might find that the order of those subjects, the ones you're really confident on, the ones that are in the middle, the ones you feel less confident on, that might change a bit. So you need to adjust and be adaptive to that plan. What I'd say in terms of timings, however, is that we very consciously keep our lesson times at around 35 to 40 minutes. I would say somewhere between 30 and 40 minutes for a revision session is about right. And I would then tend to have a 5-minute gap in between them, and I might string 2 or 3 of those sessions together before I have a longer gap. I wouldn't be looking at doing loads. I might be looking at 4 through to 6 revision sessions in the course of a day, and then I might go back later in the day where I'm doing that 5-minute review of each of those sessions later. So later in the day, after a good long rest and doing something physically active or something distracting, something enjoyable, then I might go back and build later in the day just a 30-minute review period. For each thing I've done that day, I might spend 5 minutes just going back over and looking at the tangible product of it. And the closer you get to the real examination, the more you need to build into that practice of elements of time practice. Now that doesn't mean doing whole papers, but it can mean doing bits of papers or planning an answer and starting to build in, as you get closer to the real thing, doing more of this under timed pressure. That leads us on to phase 2, which I would say is the second element of revision. As you're getting closer to the exams, then increasing your revision needs to go from the literal consumption, understanding of, and retention of the information into practicing the skills of getting the information out. Now, I would say if you're a third form student or a fourth former, and indeed in the fifth form, in those earlier trials examinations, the actual process of doing the trial really is the practice here. And that's where you're getting the expert feedback of my colleagues who are telling you how well you've done and how to make adjustments. That's absolutely fine. Don't worry too much about that. All of this is aiming towards those endpoint assessments of the public exams. So you'll probably do more timed practice, particularly at GCSE, for example, in the final 3 to 4 months before you sit the real thing. You'll do quite a lot of that in class. But the more you can practice on your own, the more it will also allow you to feel more comfortable working under time pressure and indeed to go back. So if you have a go at something on your own, you can then go off to an academic clinic, for example, and say, I had a go at this 9-mark question. I spent 20 minutes under time conditions without my notes. Could you have a look and tell me how I did? And they may say, well, you got 6 marks out of 9 there. To get 7 you would need. And then it won't just be a case of jumping from 6 to 9. You probably aim towards 7. And then when you're starting to get 7s regularly, start to aim towards 8s, etc. And that process of constant review and revision is going to be helpful. So time practice is something that should be entered into gradually. It's like riding a bike. When you first start to ride a bike, you keep the stabilizers on. And for me, the stabilizers initially when you're practicing are to chunk down that exam. So you're not trying to just have a go first time round a whole exam. Do a question or two under time conditions. Initially, the stabilizers might be using your notes. It might be giving yourself a bit extra time. And as you work things up, perhaps you take away the notes. You make the time absolutely as it should be. Sometimes, in fact, you can practice what I call practiced panic. You can practice, what if it went wrong and I had a bit less time? The reasons for doing that are, of course, we don't want things to go wrong come the exam, but what we do want is to mentally train ourselves to be in a situation of panic. By putting ourselves in that place of discomfort and realizing that we can cope with it, that's what means that we can self-calm if it goes a bit wobbly come the real exam. So, while I would say be kind to yourself and ease yourself into that, that practice panic is something I would do towards the end of your revision, and it's as much as anything a bit of a gut check for yourself to say, okay, I'm ready for this, I can cope with whatever you chuck at me. That I would suggest to you, is good for some people. If you are worried come the exam, I would suggest all the more reason to have a go at it yourself. But always, as I said in the last slide, go back and seek some feedback after you've had a go at something. Don't leave it all to yourself. Have a teacher look over it. That's what we're here for. We have all those clinics. We're happy to help. Now, as I've touched upon in some of these earlier slides, obviously the earlier you start your revision, the better, and that's precisely why we stage multiple examinations and reviews throughout the course of the year, so that you're constantly undergoing that process of revise, review, adjust. Things I would say though, when you're in a big block of revision, are to make sure that you are getting some relaxation. It's very easy to cram too much in. It's obviously easy to cram too little in, but if you're trying to cram too much in, it won't go in well enough. So making sure you get those regular breaks, making sure you chunk it up so that you're varying what you're revising on a day-to-day basis, and indeed making sure that in between you are getting sufficient rest, relaxation, good recovery, and you eat well, you drink lots of water. Hydration has an amazing effect, in fact, in terms of your focus and your ability to concentrate. Practicing calmness, I would suggest to you, helps massively. If you're a metacognition student in the third form, you've been taught about some basic breathing and mindfulness exercises. I would suggest that relaxation and self-calming is a learnt skill. And so spending those few minutes a day practicing just on focusing on your breath is very helpful if you find yourself in a loop of panic, just to regain that bit of control. If you have a Netflix subscription, for example, the completely non-denominational Headspace application is a very useful way of talking you through some ways to do that. What I would say though is what's most important is not to kid yourself. Be honest with yourself about how much you're doing, and if you need to adjust, you need to take personal accountability for that. But remember, at all times, if you're in the third form and you're doing a set of trials exams, they're never a deal breaker. You can get this wrong and learn from it. You just need next time to make some adjustments off the feedback you get. But be honest with yourself, start early, you will be fine. We've talked before about revision and particularly practicing timed examinations as taking yourself to the uncomfortable place. But we're all aware of the fact that nobody or very few people do examinations for the fun of it. They are stressful, and therefore we need to be sensible and calm about how we manage stress and to plan that as part of the whole process. The whole business of visualizing doing well and imagining doing well helps. That's why I would suggest to you initially that when you're doing your practice, you really do start to work with your notes and with a bit more time. Because if you can do it well, you know what doing well feels like, and that helps you to have a tangible example that you can lean back upon later. It lends you that degree of confidence. It helps you to imagine what well really looks like. Another way to do that sometimes is if you can't imagine what a good answer looks like or how to do it, then ask for a model answer from your teacher. They tend to help you to imagine and to visualize tangibly what success looks like. But playing that tape, your mental clip tape of what it going really well looks like, tends to be helpful to getting you in the right positive mindset to approach the examinations. Back to this business of mindfulness and the ability to control one's mind. You will always survive the experience of a trials examination. They really aren't that bad, and none of them are going to be deal breakers from you. The reason though that people panic and that they freeze is contradictory. They panic and they freeze because they want to do well, but they so want to do well, it stops them from being able to act with the relaxation and the speed that they would like, and therefore they clam up. So that process of practicing, just concentrating on your breath, taking a step back from your thoughts, is very much a learnt practice. And I would say devoting 5-10 minutes a day to that simple focus on breath allows you over time to develop that mental ability to step back. Preparation is vitally important for this. I would say it's the mental or emotional equivalent of going out for a jog. It's something which, if you do it once in a blue moon, isn't going to help. a little, quite often, tends to be very useful for developing your focus and your self-calming. I shan't labour this point anymore, but self-calming exercises, you see the URL and there's a video link in the PowerPoint version of this for you, but I would suggest the video that are provided here gives you a quick 2-minute illustration of how to do it. It's not complex stuff, but practicing it helps. We call these trials examinations because, like a boat trial, what we're doing here is floating the structure of your knowledge. And what we're seeing is, does it spring a leak anywhere, or is it floating? And obviously what we're trying to do is to refine the way in which you can float that knowledge time and time again as you go on. To quote the wonderful craggy-faced gentleman on the left, that's the Nobel Prize winning poet and dramatist Samuel Beckett, who famously said that each time we should fail again, fail better. And that's really the attitude I would suggest that you take to this. Unless you get 100% in everything, we could view that as a failure, or we could view it as an opportunity to get better and to refine our efforts from the feedback. I would say the latter is by far and away the better attitude to take. And our last point here probably is one for the students, and that's a clear message that trials are not supposed to be a trial in the sense of being all-encompassing or indeed something that gives you a verdict on you as a person. They're just a means of checking, allowing us an opportunity to consolidate our knowledge, to find out where things could be better, to get some feedback and to refine. None of it, even up to A-level grades, none of it absolutely defines one's future. I mistrust any system that simply reduces anybody to a collection of letters. All it is a developmental process, and any trials along the way, any internal examinations, are simply a means of preparing us for those endpoint assessments. And those endpoint assessments also are just part of that structure. So whilst it's something we want to take seriously, any opportunity to test ourselves should be an opportunity to gain some feedback on how we can get better. But none of it is deal-breaking. I hope that this has been useful to tell you how we prepare things. And of course, if there are any questions, then please do get in contact. Thank you very much for your attention.